More than a month after shuffling his cabinet, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has released his marching orders for the ministers he put into new or expanded roles. And it looks like Bill Blair will tackle some, actually a lot, of the most pressing issues in this country, including looking at whether Canada should bring in a ban on handguns. So how will Minister Blair come to a decision on that? Earlier, I spoke to the Minister of Border Security and Organized Crime Reduction, Bill Blair. Hi, Minister Blair. Nice to see you again.
Good to see you as well, Vashi.
Thanks for your time. So you've been tasked with studying a full ban on handguns and assault weapons in Canada. Will you report on the results of that study before the next election?
Absolutely. The Prime Minister has made it very clear that he wants me to do a very comprehensive review of the issue of gun violence and frankly, to consider all of our options, including a handgun ban and a ban on assault rifles. And so, that work will commence immediately. But I also recognize that, I've traveled across the country a fair bit this summer. I've been in Lower Mainland BC and here in Toronto and in Montreal, towns and cities across the country. People are very concerned about gun violence and they want and expect their government to take effective measures. And I'm quite prepared to engage with stakeholders, talk to the provinces and territories and work diligently to examine that issue, find the ways that are necessary to keep our country safe.
So when will the results of that, or when will that study be completed? What is the timeline, and will the results be made public?
Well, I can tell you that we'll begin immediately. It's important work, and there are many issues to be canvassed, but it is my intention to report back to the government. I hope to also be transparent about this. This is an issue that concerns Canadians. I know we've heard from a great many of them, and there are many stakeholders and different perspectives on gun safety and gun legislation, and so I'm hoping that can be as open and transparent as possible. A very collaborative approach is the way I think that we need to go forward. But at the same time, we have to very critically examine all of the things that we can do to keep our country safe. It's also important to acknowledge, Vashi, we already have very strong legislation before the Senate, Bill C-71. And so we have taken some very important and effective measures to create a safer environment and to improve the system of encouraging responsible gun ownership. But we're quite prepared to look at any other measure that can be effective in keeping our community safe. Do
you think a ban will be effective in addressing the issue when one of the major issues is illegal guns coming across the border?
Now, let me tell you that I'm strongly of the belief, I've dealt with gun violence for a very long time, and there is no one single measure, but I think that we have to look at all of the things that we can do. First of all, to restrict the access that people who are intent on criminal activity restrict their access to guns, in particular handguns. But in addition to that, we've got to do a lot of work within our communities and with young people to reduce the demand for guns and to really get at this violent subculture that exists in many of our urban and even rural communities in order to make them safe. So we're looking at all of the things that are necessary and will be effective in keeping our country safe, including greater restrictions possibly around firearms, but also reducing the demand for those guns.
I also asked the minister about another part of his mandate, to oversee the surge of asylum seekers coming into this country. Have a listen. In a recent letter to the Canadian Bar Association, first reported on by the National Post, Immigration Minister Ahmed Hussein called the backlogged asylum system unsustainable. Your government has criticized the opposition for calling this issue or anything around it a crisis. But if it is unsustainable, doesn't that mean it is a crisis?
Actually, Vashi, we've made some very significant investments. I think the minister was advising the Canadian Bar Association that we have to make some changes in the way in which we are managing the IRB hearings for those who are seeking asylum. And we're making significant investments in order to reduce the amount of time that it takes to complete that process. In addition to that, I've been very specifically tasked by the Prime Minister to lead a discussion and enter into discussions with the United States about modernizing the Safe Third Country Agreement. But we are already taking very significant steps to manage the situation that we are currently dealing with and to reduce the backlog that was created by the initial surge. And so those investments are being made and the situation is being managed. Quite frankly, I believe it is not a crisis, simply because we are making the changes and addressing the circumstances that have given rise to this situation. And right now, I will tell you, the numbers are down significantly over the surge that we experienced earlier in the year. And you know, the number of people actually crossing the border each day is quite manageable with the resources that we currently have dedicated to it.
So what do you mean by manageable? Because I think you've invested $74 million specifically in 2018 in the budget, especially to help the IRB finalize claims. Has that process sped up because of that investment, and by how much?
No, that process, what we were confronted with was a very significant backlog of cases as a result of the surge that happened. The investments are being made, and we're staffing up in order to deal with that backlog. And at the same time, we've been working closely with the provinces, particularly with the province of Quebec, but also reaching out to Ontario and some municipalities to assist them in the extraordinary costs that they may have experienced as a result of this surge. But the steps are being taken to ensure that the rule of law is being upheld, that we are bringing greater efficiency into the way in which we are managing, you know, these individuals who are coming seeking to make a claim for asylum, so that that's done in a timely way. And in addition, you know, there are important discussions that need to take place in a bilateral. Since 2004, we've had a bilateral agreement with the United States called the Safe Third Country Agreement. That, you know, circumstances have changed over the last 14 years. That agreement is in need of modernization, and I've been tasked with undertaking that discussion with our bilateral partner in the United States.
And I definitely want to ask you about those discussions concentrated on the Safe Third Country Agreement. But on this point, I mean, there is a big discussion going on, you know, among Canadians, among, you know, in political circles as well, about the way in which this issue is being characterized. And it has become extremely political. Your government is saying that the Conservatives are unjustly calling it a crisis, and that this is, you know, essentially all under control. And the Conservatives are saying that you're normalizing this by insisting that it isn't a crisis. Yet in this letter, which is only from August, the minister calls it unsustainable. I mean, is there a bit of mixed messages going on here? Well,
let me be really clear. I'm not criticizing anyone's comment or critique on that. If good ideas come forward, they'll be considered, but we're managing the situation as it currently exists, and we're taking, I think, important steps. We've taken steps already with our international partners, and particularly the United States, to mitigate the impact of, you know, individuals coming to our border. There is obviously more work to be done there, and we're doing that work. But in addition, those individuals who have presented themselves, it has caused a fairly significant pressure on the existing resources of the IRB. We're investing additional resources to make sure that those processes, which are part of our legal obligation and quite frankly, it's due process to which, you know, we have made a commitment to, but we're making sure that it's done in an efficient way. And I think what Canadians expect of us is that we will uphold the law, we will protect the safety and security of our country, and that when, like all countries in the world, are faced with these irregular migrations and people seeking asylum, that we will uphold our international obligations, but also manage it effectively. And so we are undertaking to do that. And certainly we have dealt with some extraordinary circumstances as a result of things that have taken place outside of our country. But we are managing that, I think, quite effectively. And where we can make improvements on the existing system, we're making those investments, we're making those improvements, and we're doing everything we can to uphold the rule of law, but also to ensure that people who present themselves at our borders seeking the protection of asylum, that we fulfill our international and Canadian legal obligations to those individuals, to treat them with compassion and with dignity.
When will is there a date set for your first meetings with your counterparts in the U.S. on the Safe Third Country Agreement?
No, as you know, that there are a number of really important discussions going on with the United States even today, and you reported on that earlier. I've been given my mandate by the Prime Minister this week, and we will undertake that work as quickly as possible.
Okay, I'll leave it there. Thanks so much, Minister Blair.
Thanks, Vashi.